Hello to you, Ms Houghton. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. What's the problem? What's the issue?
Our members are asking for their pay to be returned to pre-pandemic levels. During the pandemic, British Airways very opportunistically used something called fire and rehire to force our members into accepting a 10% pay cut. And these are some of the lowest paid workers in the airline. And all they want is to have that 10% pay cut reinstated. They want to help British Airways get back to pre-pandemic profitability. And they think that the best way to do that is to invest in their staff to ensure that recruitment and retention is in place. And our members have been experiencing extremely high levels of verbal and, unfortunately, in some cases, physical abuse, which has been brought about by the lack of preparation for the reopening of the industry. And it's really on the back end of receiving this abuse and the frustration that they're experiencing that they've had enough. And they've been asking nicely now for over a year for British Airways to reinstate this 10% pay cut, and BA just aren't listening.
So tell me more about some of this physical abuse that your members have been at the sharp end of.
They've had to be escorted out of the airport by police. They've experienced homophobic abuse. They have been spat at. I had one woman, this wasn't at Heathrow, but at Birmingham Airport, where the CEO has just been awarded a 50% pay increase. A ticket agent, passenger service agent, working for one of the largest ground handling companies in the country, was pulled over the ticket desk by a male passenger out of his frustration, and her colleagues had to assist her.
So just to clarify, in Birmingham, somebody dragged one of your members over the ticket desk?
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. What happened?
Well, her colleagues thankfully sort of managed to pull her back. And these workers, they're not on much more than the minimum wage, Kay. And they love working for the aviation industry. They've done it for many, many years. They want the industry to get back on its knees, and they want to help families to start flying again. But how can they do that when they're being treated like this?
Given that we know that the government is against fire and rehire, given what happened with P&O, and they stepped in there saying that it was completely against the government's opinion and position, what's Grant Shapps doing to support your union?
Very little, Kay. I don't accept that this government is against fire and rehire. Hugh Merriman was very outspoken about it during the British Airways attack on our members. To suggest that the government is against fire and rehire, but to then make it harder for workers to try to fight back and win back what they had taken from them as a result of fire and rehire during the pandemic doesn't really stack up for me.
Do you acknowledge, or to what extent do you acknowledge, that if your members do go on strike, they're going to cause absolute chaos for travellers who just want to get away on holiday with the kids?
The point of a strike is obviously to organise it at a time when it is going to be most effective and most disruptive. Our members have had to jump through anti-trade union laws to get to the point of even being able to hold a democratic industrial action ballot that they voted in. And our members don't do this lightly. And you will have heard it been said many times before, the strike is a last resort. And as I said at the start, we've been asking for British Airways to reinstate this pay cut for well over a year now. And where we've ended up is our members feeling that they're not being listened to. And so they've had to take matters into their own hands and use the power that they have available to them through a democratic, legal, industrial action ballot. And yes, it will cause disruption. And yes, my members and I are genuinely sorry for any disruption that is going to cause to hardworking families who so desperately want to get away after not being able to fly as a result of the pandemic. But what our members are doing here is defending their living standards. They just want to be able to have a decent standard of living. They are primarily women, many of them part-time. I've spoken about the verbal and physical abuse that they face. They've got families to look after as well. And this isn't just about them being able to have a holiday. This is about them being able to put food on the table.
Coordinated strike action is something that's been suggested by the RMT union. Is that something that your union would support?
we're not having behind closed doors discussions about coordinating industrial action. When industrial action happens, it happens organically. It happens when working people have had enough and they've decided that they need to use the power that they have available to them to withdraw their labour. If there is an opportunity to coordinate industrial action, and look, disputes don't run on a linear line. You know, there's lots of ups and downs, and there's bumps in the road, and there's negotiations to be had, and there's decisions to be had about when it's the appropriate time to organise industrial action. But if coordinated industrial action is the right course of action, and that is what is decided by our reps and our members, because they're the ones that call the shots in this process. We're a democratic organisation, and it's our reps and members that make these decisions. If that is the right course of action, then I don't see any reason why we wouldn't.
So you would support a summer of discontent?
No, it's not about supporting a summer of discontent, Kate. It's about working people having had enough. It's about the fact that the CEO of British Airways gets paid £848,000 and the CEO of IAG, the parent company of British Airways, gets paid £4.9 million. It's about the fact that British Airways paid £1.6 billion in dividends out to shareholders when it was profitable prior to the pandemic, instead of reinvesting that money into its staff and into things like IT systems to make sure that the airline is able to function properly. It's about the fact that working people have seen the sharpest decline in their living standards in 2 decades. And it's about the fact that working people have had enough, and actually that they see that there is some hope in standing together collectively and organising. And if this is the spark that lights the flame, that leads to working people...
interrupt you there. Do forgive me. Come back and talk to us next week or whenever you'd like to. Thanks so much indeed for joining us on the programme.